What if I told you that the entire narrative of Little People, Big World's most painful chapter, the sale of Roloff Farms, was built on a lie? A lie so profound, so carefully constructed, that it required the network itself, TLC, to bury the single most explosive piece of footage in the show's history. We're talking about a confession, a moment of raw, unvarnished truth from Matt Roloff that was captured on camera, a moment that would have changed everything we thought we knew about him, about the farm, and about the family's tragic feud. But you never saw it. TLC made sure that they locked it away, hiding the truth to protect their star and their storyline. But secrets like this don't stay buried forever. Today, we're opening the case file on the confession that never aired. We're putting TLC on the stand and demanding they release the tapes. Before we break the seal on one of the biggest cover-ups in reality television history, I need you to become part of the jury. Your engagement fuels this investigation. Please take 1 second to hit that like button, subscribe to LPBW Update, and ring the notification bell. By doing so, you're not just supporting the channel, you're casting a vote for the truth and joining thousands of other fans who are demanding answers. Your support is critical as we peel back the layers of this carefully crafted deception. Now, let's get to the evidence. The story we were sold was one of heartbreak and miscommunication. A father, Matt Roloff, trying to secure his legacy, and two sons, Zach and Jeremy, unable to meet the financial demands to carry it on. It was presented as a tragedy of economics, a sad but understandable chapter in the family's saga. We saw the strained negotiations, we saw Zach's anger and Amy's sorrow. We were led to believe that Matt's hands were tied, that he offered a family discount that just wasn't enough. He painted himself as a victim of circumstance, a patriarch forced to make an impossible choice. But this entire narrative hinges on one critical assumption, that Matt genuinely wanted his sons to take over the farm. For years, this was the bedrock of his public persona. The farm was for the kids. It was their legacy. He was just the steward, preparing it for the next generation. This was the promise he made not just to his family, but to the millions of viewers who watched them grow up. This is where the official story begins to crumble. The first cracks appeared not in a secret tape, but in plain sight, through the words and actions of the rest of the Roloff family. Think of them as our first witnesses. Amy Roloff, in her book A Little Me, and in countless confessionals, spoke of a Matt who often operated in a world of his own, making unilateral decisions that affected the entire family. She painted a picture of a man driven by projects and profits, often at the expense of sentiment. Was this the same man who would selflessly hand over his life's work? Then there are the sons. Jeremy, who spent years actively working on the farm, designing and planning for his future there, suddenly and silently walked away from negotiations. The show gave us vague reasons, but the abruptness of it all felt wrong. It was a piece of the puzzle that didn't fit. And then there's Zach. Zach, who has always been the more transparent, emotionally accessible son on camera. His raw anger and sense of betrayal during the farm negotiations were palpable. He didn't just seem disappointed, he seemed personally deceived. He accused his father of creating a false narrative, of manipulating the situation for his own ends. Remember his words? "My dad is manipulating the narrative." And to his wife, Tori, he said, "It's this whole pompous, I'm a creator, I'm a visionary." It's like, no, you're a 60-year-old man who's lived on a 30-acre farm in Oregon for his whole life. This wasn't the reaction of a son who simply lost a business deal. This was the cry of a son who felt his father had lied to him, who had dangled a lifelong dream in front of him, only to snatch it away. These weren't just disagreements. They were character testimonies against Matt's carefully curated image. They were suggesting a rewrite of history, a deep and fundamental betrayal that went far beyond the asking price of a piece of land. Their collective disillusionment was the first piece of evidence that the story we were being told was incomplete. It was the smoke that hinted at a much larger fire. And that fire, we now have reason to believe, was captured on a tape that TLC has kept under lock and key. This brings us to the heart of the matter, the genesis of this entire investigation, but persistent report from an individual claiming to be a former crew member on Little People, Big World. This source, who must remain anonymous to protect their career, reached out with a story so stunning it recontextualizes the entire farm feud. According to this insider, in the weeks following the failed negotiations with Zach, a confessional session with Matt Roloff went in a direction no one expected. Typically, these sessions are guided by producers to craft a specific storyline. But this time, something was different. Matt, perhaps exhausted from the family conflict, perhaps emboldened by the belief that his narrative was firmly in his control, let the mask slip. The insider alleges that during this taping, Matt admitted something earth-shattering. He confessed in no uncertain terms that he never had any real intention of selling the farm to his sons for a price they could realistically afford. The source described the atmosphere in the control room as one of stunned silence. Producers allegedly looked at each other, realizing the gravity of what had just been captured. Matt, according to the report, went on a rant explaining that the negotiations were primarily for the show's storyline. He saw the conflict as a compelling dramatic arc for the season. He allegedly spoke of the farm not as a family legacy to be passed down, but as his primary financial asset, his retirement plan, and that selling it to the kids at a steep discount would be, in his own supposed words, a foolish business move. He framed the entire ordeal as a test of his son's ambition, a test he knew they would fail, thereby justifying his ultimate decision to put the property on the open market. He essentially admitted to orchestrating a painful family drama for television ratings and personal financial gain. This wasn't just a slip of the tongue. The insider described it as a moment of pure, unfiltered ego. A moment where Matt Roloff, the character, disappeared, and Matt Roloff, the businessman, laid his cards on the table. He believed he was simply explaining his strategy, but what he was doing was confessing to a calculated, emotional manipulation of his own children. The production team immediately knew they had a problem. This footage directly contradicted the sympathetic, heartbroken father narrative they were carefully constructing. It painted Matt as a cold, calculating opportunist. It validated every single accusation of manipulation Zach had thrown at him. It was a smoking gun. And so a decision was made, the footage was flagged, pulled from the editing queue, and buried. The official story would proceed as planned. The lie would be protected. Now, a report from an anonymous source is not enough. We need corroborating evidence. This is where we, the jury, must put on our detective hats and examine the public record. If Matt did indeed have this moment of unguarded honesty, then the pressure of maintaining the lie afterward would inevitably lead to cracks in his story. And those cracks are everywhere. Let's start connecting the dots. In the episodes that aired, Matt consistently framed the offers from his sons as being unserious. He lamented that they didn't come in with a real plan. Yet, Jeremy has publicly stated that he submitted a comprehensive multi-year business plan for the farm. Why was this never mentioned on the show? Why was Matt's version of events the only one given airtime? This omission is a form of editing, a conscious choice to withhold information that would have given credibility to the son's position. Then there are Matt's own words in various interviews and social media posts, where his story seems to shift depending on the audience. In one interview, He'd express deep sadness over the situation, claiming it was the last thing he ever wanted. In another, on an Instagram Live, he'd take a more defensive, business-like tone, stating that it's a business, folks, and that he refused to give away his golden goose. The emotional, heartbroken father and the cutthroat businessman are two different characters, yet Matt plays both of them, seemingly unaware that they contradict each other. For example, during the show, he repeatedly stated he offered a huge family discount, implying he was being more than generous. But later, in a social media comment, he defended the high price by listing all the assets included, justifying it from a purely market value perspective. He never once mentioned that discount again. It was a talking point for the show, a piece of the narrative that was discarded once it was no longer needed. This is what psychologists call duping delight, a subtle tell of a person who believes they are getting away with a lie. They become overconfident, forgetting the details of the narrative they've spun. We see Matt do this repeatedly. He'll make a sympathetic plea on television, then post a picture of himself and Corinne on a lavish vacation in Arizona, seemingly unbothered by the family he supposedly tore apart. The dissonance is jarring. The public statements don't align. This isn't just a father struggling with a tough decision. This is a man trying to manage a public relations crisis of his own making, and he's struggling to keep his stories straight. Each contradiction is a piece of circumstantial evidence that supports the insider's claim. He's not just misspeaking, he's revealing in flashes the mindset that he allegedly confessed to on that lost tape, that business comes first and the family narrative can be shaped to serve it. The evidence isn't in one single statement, but in the pattern of 100 conflicting ones. A pattern of deception that points directly back to a moment of truth that was deemed too damaging to ever see the light of day. Let us now move into a deeper examination of the evidence, moving beyond mere contradictions and into the realm of psychological and narrative manipulation. This is where the case against the official story becomes truly compelling. We must consider the concept of history being written by the victors. In The World of Little People, Big World, Matt Roloff, by virtue of his control over the central asset, the farm, and his powerful role in the show's production, is the victor. He controls the narrative because he controls the location and, to a large extent, the storyline. The show is, in many ways, his show. TLC, as a network, has invested millions of dollars in over 2 decades in building the Matt Roloff brand. He is not just a cast member, he is an asset. And you always protect your assets. This brings us to the betrayal. The betrayal isn't just Matt deceiving his children, it's the network, TLC, deceiving its audience. Viewers sign an unwritten contract with a reality show. We accept that some situations are staged, that conversations are edited for clarity. But we believe at our core that the emotional truth of the characters is real. We invested in the Roloffs as a family. We watched the children grow up. We celebrated their weddings. We mourned their struggles. TLC's decision to allegedly bury Matt's confession is a fundamental breach of that contract. They chose to present a manufactured, sympathetic narrative over the raw, complicated truth. Why? Because the truth was too ugly. The truth would have irreparably damaged their central character. A father who admits to using his children's lifelong dreams as a plot device for a TV show is not a sympathetic patriarch. He's a villain. And villains don't sell family-friendly reality shows. So the network engaged in a cover-up. They didn't just hide the tape, they actively constructed a new reality around its absence. Let's look at the editing of the seasons following the farm dispute. Notice how conversations are often clipped. We see the start of an argument, the emotional reaction, but rarely the logical progression of the conflict. We get Zach's anger, but not the specific details he's angry about. We get Matt's pained expression, but not a direct answer to the accusations. This is intentional. The editors are masters at creating emotion while obscuring information. They are protecting Matt by never allowing him to be truly cross-examined on camera. They feed us a diet of emotional B-roll, Matt looking thoughtfully over the farm, Zach sighing in frustration, all set to a sad instrumental track. This is narrative manipulation 101. They are telling us how to feel, so we don't have to think too hard about the facts that aren't adding up. This is where we must enter our own hypothetical courtroom confrontation. Imagine if we, the jury of fans, could question Matt under oath with the supposed lost tape as Exhibit A. The cross-examination would be devastating. We would ask, Mr. Roloff, on the show, you claimed you were heartbroken that your sons couldn't afford the farm, but do you recall a confessional taping on or around April of 2021 where you stated that the negotiations were primarily for the show's storyline and that you never intended to sell at a price they could afford? How could he answer that? If he denies it, he risks the tape being leaked. If he admits it, his entire public persona is destroyed. We would continue. Mr. Roloff, you presented the family discount as a significant concession. Can you provide any documentation or specific figures to show how this discount was calculated and how it compared to the market value assessment you later touted on social media? The vagueness of the family discount was always its greatest weakness. It was a concept, not a number, a tool to make him look generous without actually costing him anything. We would press further. Your son, Zachary, accused you of manipulating the narrative. The alleged confession seems to support his claim. Were you, in fact, creating a storyline for television at the expense of your son's trust and emotional well-being? This is the core of the issue. It transcends business. It's about a father's moral and ethical responsibility to his child, a responsibility many fans believe he abdicated in favor of fame and fortune. In this courtroom of public opinion, the weight of circumstantial evidence is overwhelming. We have the testimony of Amy, Zach, and Jeremy, whose actions and words all point to a deep sense of betrayal. We have Matt's own pattern of contradictory statements, a classic indicator of deception. And we have the powerful motive of both Matt and TLC to protect their multi-million-dollar brand. The missing tape is the final piece of the puzzle, the confession that ties it all together. Its absence is, paradoxically, the most damning evidence of all. Innocent parties do not hide evidence. Networks do not bury footage that supports their star's narrative. You only bury what can destroy you. The decision to hide that tape was TLC's verdict on Matt Roloff. They judged him to be guilty, and their sentence was to erase the truth and hope no one ever found out. This brings us to the ruling. Based on the mountain of evidence presented, the inconsistencies in the official story, the testimony from other family members, and the powerful motive for a cover-up, the theory of the lost confession gains incredible credibility. It moves from speculation to a highly probable explanation for the events we've witnessed. The ruling, therefore, is not just about a single lie. It's about the very foundation of Matt Roloff's public identity. If the insider's report is true, then Matt's reputation is not built on truth, but on a carefully constructed edifice of edits, omissions, and outright deception. The folksy, dreaming farm patriarch is a character, and the real Matt Roloff is a shrewd businessman who was willing to sacrifice his family's trust for a compelling television narrative and a better sale price. The power of proof here is not in possessing the physical tape, but in the power of deductive reasoning. It's like seeing a footprint in the mud. We don't need to see the person who made it to know they were there. The footprint itself is the proof. In this case, the footprint is the gaping hole in the show's narrative, the inexplicable contradictions, the raw pain in his son's eyes. The lost confession is the only logical explanation that fits that footprint perfectly. It is the key that unlocks the entire mystery. It explains Jeremy's silence, Zach's rage, Amy's sorrow, and Matt's bizarrely shifting public statements. Without the theory of the confession, these are all just random, confusing events. With it, they snap into a clear, coherent, and tragic picture. So where does this leave us? We, the jury, have reached a verdict. The official narrative is fiction. But this is not a moment of defeat. This is a moment of victory. The victory is not enforcing TLC's hand. They will never, ever release that tape. To do so would be to admit their own culpability in a massive, years-long deception. The victory is in the community of fans seeing through the facade. The victory is in understanding the truth, even if the perpetrators will never admit to it. We have taken back the story, we have pieced together the evidence that they tried to hide, and we have solved the case. We know what happened, and that knowledge is its own form of justice. The power has shifted from the editor's bay in a TLC studio to the millions of viewers who can now watch the show with open eyes, understanding the subtext and seeing the characters for who they truly are, not who the producers want them to be. But the story doesn't end here, because a secret of this magnitude raises a terrifying question. If they were willing to go to these lengths to cover up a confession about the farm, what else have they hidden? The farm feud is recent. This show has been on for over 20 years. What other moments of damning honesty, what other dark confessions lie locked away in the TLC vault? What was said during the height of the divorce that was deemed too toxic for television? What truths about the family's business dealings or personal relationships have been systematically erased to maintain the wholesome image the network needs? The Lost Farm Confession may not be a standalone event. It may be part of a pattern, a standard operating procedure for a show that has, perhaps for years, prioritized narrative over reality. The final chilling cliffhanger is this. What was so dangerous in those tapes that TLC felt they had to hide them forever? Was it simply Matt admitting he manipulated the farm sale for the show? Or did he, in that moment of unchecked ego, confess to more? Did he reveal his true feelings about his family, his marriage to Amy, or his future with Karen? Did he admit that the wholesome family image, the one that built the Roloff empire, was a carefully managed illusion from the very beginning? The tape isn't just about a real estate transaction. It's about the potential collapse of a 2-decade legacy. And it makes you wonder what the next insider might reveal. The truth is out there, and we will not stop searching for it. Welcome back to LPBW Update, into the second, deeper phase of our investigation into the Matt Roloff confession that never aired. In the first part, we laid out the bombshell case, and an insider report of a buried tape, the corroborating evidence of Matt's contradictory statements, and the emotional testimony from his own family that suggests a profound deception. We established a powerful motive for both Matt and TLC to hide this footage, to protect the carefully crafted image of a sympathetic family patriarch, an image that is central to the show's success. We, as a jury of fans, have concluded that the official story of the Roloff Farms sale is a fabrication. Now, we must go deeper. This isn't just about one event. This is about a pattern of behavior, a history of narrative manipulation that may stretch back to the very beginning of the show. We are going to connect dots you never even thought to look at. And by the end, you will see that the farm feud wasn't an isolated incident, but the inevitable climax of a story that was always controlled by one person. To truly understand the significance of the buried confession, we must perform a forensic analysis of Matt Roloff's character as presented over 2 decades of television. This is a deeper dive. From the earliest seasons, Matt was portrayed as the dreamer, the visionary. He was the one with the big ideas, the man who built pumpkin patches and pirate ships. Amy was often cast as the pragmatic, sometimes scolding counterpoint. She was the one who worried about budgets and practicality. This dynamic, established early on, was a brilliant piece of narrative framing. It automatically positioned Matt as the protagonist of the show's central theme, overcoming limitations. He was the little person who dreamed big and, more often than not, made those dreams a reality. It's a compelling, heroic archetype. But what if that framing was a deliberate choice to obscure a more complex and less flattering truth? For every project Matt successfully completed, how many were started and abandoned, leaving financial and emotional messes in their wake? The show rarely dwelled on the failures. It celebrated the successes. This was a subtle but powerful form of manipulation. By focusing on the finished pirate ship and not the half-finished projects rusting behind a barn, the producers built a myth of Matt as a creative genius. This myth became his shield. Anytime his behavior could be questioned, it was excused under the banner of his visionary personality. When he made unilateral decisions that impacted Amy and the kids, he wasn't being controlling. He was just being Matt, the dreamer who couldn't be bogged down by details. This historical context is crucial because it shows that the manipulation we saw in the farm negotiations wasn't a new development. It was the perfection of a technique Matt and the show's producers had been honing for years. He has always been the primary author of the Roloff family story. Let's re-examine the divorce. We were shown a narrative of two people who had simply grown apart. But Amy's book and her guarded comments on the show hinted at something deeper. She spoke of feeling lonely, unheard, and living parallel lives long before the separation. She hinted at infidelities and a fundamental lack of partnership. Yet on the show, Matt was often given the final word. His confessionals would frame their issues in neutral, almost philosophical terms. He was rarely, if ever, held accountable for any specific actions that may have contributed to the breakdown of the marriage. The narrative was sanitized. Now, let's apply this understanding to the alleged lost confession. The Matt Roloff, who, according to The Insider, admitted to faking the farm drama for television, is the same Matt Roloff who has been controlling his own narrative for 20 years. It's not an aberration, it's a culmination. He had become so accustomed to the producers editing his life to fit a heroic archetype that he no longer saw the line between reality and television. In his mind, orchestrating a painful family conflict for the cameras might not have even felt wrong. It was simply producing a good season of his show. The confession wasn't a moment of guilt, it was a moment of pride. He was, in his own mind, the master producer, the visionary creating a compelling story. The tragedy is that the story was real for everyone else. Zach's pain was real. Amy's sorrow was real. But to Matt, they were merely actors in his grand production. This leads us to the most insidious aspect of the cover-up, the power of proof, or more accurately, the power of its absence. TLC and Matt are banking on the fact that without the physical tape, any accusation is just a he said, she said situation. They can dismiss fan theories as baseless speculation, the ramblings of disgruntled viewers. They can hide behind the edit. This is why our investigation is so important. We are demonstrating that you don't need the murder weapon in your hand when the killer's fingerprints are all over the crime scene. The fingerprints in this case are the countless inconsistencies, the emotional fallout, and the psychological patterns that are visible to anyone willing to look closely. Let's connect some more dots. Think about the introduction of Karen Chandler into the show. The narrative we were given was that Matt and Karen developed a relationship after his separation from Amy. It was presented as a clean, post-divorce romance. However, Amy herself expressed extreme discomfort with Karen, who had been a longtime farm employee. Amy stated on camera, "I've known her for a long time. There was more than just a working relationship." This was a bombshell accusation of an emotional, if not physical, affair. But how did the show handle it? It was framed as Amy's bitterness, her inability to move on. Matt and Corinne were portrayed as the happy couple being unfairly judged. Amy's valid feelings were delegitimized. Now, imagine a lost confession from that era. Imagine Matt admitting the timeline of his relationship with Karen was much more complicated than the show let on. Do you think for a second TLC would have aired it? Absolutely not. It would have destroyed the new beginning storyline they were building for their main character. The alleged burial of the farm confession is not an isolated incident. It is standard operating procedure. The Roloff family story, as presented on TLC, is a curated fiction, and any truth that threatens the integrity of that fiction is destined for the cutting room floor. So, how do we move from a compelling theory to something that feels like undeniable proof? We do it by building a case so dense with evidence that the official story collapses under its own weight. Let's enter the final phase of our courtroom confrontation. We will now present a hypothetical transcript based on the details provided by our insider source. This is what we believe was said, the words that were so damning they had to be erased from history. Imagine the scene. Matt is in the confessional chair. The lighting is low. He's just finished a grueling day of filming a tense scene with Zach. The producer's voice comes through the speaker. "So, Matt, that was tough to watch. You must be heartbroken." Here is the hypothetical transcript of the unaired confession. "Heartbroken? Look, are things tense? Sure. But heartbroken? That's the TV word. This is business. I've been telling the boys for years, this place is a business. It's my asset, my 401k, my retirement, whatever you want to call it. I'm not just going to give it away because they have some nostalgic fantasy about running around the pumpkin patch forever. The world doesn't work that way. I built this place from nothing. Me, my sweat, my ideas. They think they can just step in. They have no idea what it takes. You want to know the truth, the real truth? I was never going to sell it to them. Not at that price. Not a chance. The negotiation that was for you guys, that was for the show. It's a great storyline, right? The father, the sons, the battle for the family legacy. It's Shakespearean. It's compelling television. But it was never a real negotiation. It was a performance. I knew their number. They knew my number. And there was never a world where those two numbers would meet. I needed to show the audience, and frankly, I needed to show Amy that I made an effort, that I gave them a chance. So I offered them the family discount. It sounds good, doesn't it? But the final number was always going to be one they couldn't reach. It was designed that way. It was a test I set them up to fail. Zach is angry because he's finally realizing that this is a television show and I'm the executive producer of my own life. He thought this was real life. It is, but it's not. My reality is protecting my investment. His reality is feeling betrayed. Both can be true, but my reality is the one that gets a final say. He'll get over it. The kids always do. And we got a hell of a season out of it. So, yeah. Am I sad? A little. But heartbroken? No, I'm satisfied. I played the game and I won. The farm is secure. Its value is protected. And now I can sell it to whomever I want for what it's actually worth. The story is tied up in a neat little bow. It's a tragedy, sure, but the audience loves a good tragedy. End of hypothetical transcript. Now, I want you to sit with that for a moment. Read those words again. Does that sound like the Matt Roloff we see in interviews, the one who carefully chooses his words and plays the victim? Or does it sound like the unfiltered, arrogant, business-first Matt that Zach described? The man who called himself a creator and a visionary above all else. It aligns perfectly with every piece of evidence we have. It explains his lack of genuine remorse, his quick pivots to business talk, and his seeming indifference to his son's pain. It is the missing piece. This is the confession that explains everything. This is the truth that TLC buried. This brings us to the judgment. The time has come for us, the jury, to render our final verdict. We have been presented with two conflicting narratives. The first is the TLC-approved story of a well-intentioned father forced into a tragic business decision. The second is the story we have built here today, a story of calculated manipulation, a father who sacrificed his son's trust for television ratings and financial gain, and a network that was fully complicit in the cover-up. The judgment of this court of public opinion is clear. We find the official narrative to be false. We find Matt Roloff guilty of profound emotional manipulation and deceit, and we find the network, TLC, guilty of a massive breach of trust with its audience by knowingly and intentionally hiding the truth. This judgment is not given lightly. It is the result of a thorough examination of the evidence, both on screen and off. It is a conclusion reached by connecting the dots that the producers tried so desperately to keep separate. This is our ruling, and it is final. Matt Roloff's legacy is not that of a dreaming patriarch, but of a man who, in the end, valued his creation more than his creators, his farm more than his family. But what is the consequence of this ruling? In a real court, there would be a sentence. Here, the sentence is the truth itself. The sentence is that we, the fans, will never watch the show the same way again. We will no longer passively accept the narratives we are fed. We will question every edit, analyze every confessional, and scrutinize every storyline. We will watch as informed, critical viewers armed with the knowledge of the deception that lies at the heart of the show. This is the victory. The power is no longer in the edit bay. It is with us, the informed audience. We have become the fact checkers, the historians, the keepers of the real story. We have won our freedom from the manufactured reality that TLC tried to sell us. And now we must look to the future. The revelation of this cover-up doesn't just reframe the past, it casts a dark shadow over the future of the show. If the central conflict of the past few seasons was based on a lie, what does that mean for the seasons to come? The show will undoubtedly try to move on. They will try to create new storylines, new dramas, new family moments, but the foundation is cracked. The trust is broken. How can we ever believe another word Matt says on camera? How can we ever trust that a scene of family reconciliation is real and not just another performance for the cameras? The answer is we can't. The very fabric of the show has been torn and it can never be repaired. Every future scene at the farm will be tainted by the knowledge of how it was truly lost to the next generation. Every interaction between Matt and his sons will be viewed through the lens of this ultimate betrayal. The show, as we knew it, is over. It may continue to air, but its soul is gone. It is now nothing more than a ghost, a hollow reenactment of a family that was fractured by the very show that was supposed to celebrate it. We will end where we began, with the central mystery, the tapes. The demand for their release will likely grow louder, even though we know it is a futile effort. The tapes have become a symbol, a holy grail of truth in a sea of reality TV fiction. They represent the moment the mask slipped, the moment the king was revealed to have no clothes. And while we may never see them, their legend will persist. It will be whispered in fan forums, debated in comment sections, and explored in videos like this one for years to come. The confession may have never aired, but it will never be forgotten. It is now a permanent part of the Little People, Big World legacy, the story of the truth that was too real for reality TV. And this raises one final terrifying thought. Our insider source gave us the details of the farm confession, but they also hinted that this was not the only secret they were aware of. They spoke of other tapes, other moments, other lies. The farm feud, as monumental as it was, might just be the tip of the iceberg. And the next secret to be revealed could be the one that sinks the entire ship. Stay subscribed because this investigation is far from over.